Michael, and after that's Derek. We'll be talking about the uncertainty theory. So begin with the uncertainty theory. Every single time you walk into a situation, there's a lot of things that you can't really predict. When we were driving to class this morning or later in the afternoon, you don't really know if a car could possibly hit you or that you maybe have to get a new battery. That actually happened to me during spring break when I went to visit one of my friends, actually. My car battery died randomly, so there's always uncertainty in everything. So the business dictionary has a definition of what uncertainty basically stands, that whatever you do, whatever you prepare, there's always a lot of different things and a lot of unknown involving what could possibly happen. So moving on to that, we have the importance. So why exactly are we talking about this? We are all business students. So, regardless of how much we present for this presentation, the lights might go off, the power might be off, air conditioning, something. Or the clicker could run out of battery. So involving that, I brought up an example involving the pricing decision. This is provided by Huang in 2014. It is from a journal. So Huang basically was talking about how involving different pricing, there's a lot of different variables that can happen, depending on how many units you have or the demand, the price might be different, increasing or decreasing. So a lot of uncertainty for a business and also just in different scenarios. And our whole point of the, essay/PowerPoint/visual aid for this presentation would be focusing on that regardless of how much you prepare or whatever you focus on for a class or whatever type of scenario, there's a lot of uncertainty. So I found a funny quote saying, the only certainty is that nothing is certain. So I'll be passing over to Jonathan where he'll talk about the preview. And for the preview, we talk about objectification and communication between men and women. That's what Jonathan will be talking about right after this. Michael will be talking about the uncertainty in international service learning. And Derek will be talking about uncertainty involving cultures and the economic effects of uncertainty. So this is where I'll pass over to Jonathan.
Thank you, Jordan. So I'll be talking about communication and uncertainty as a broad topic. So first, I came across an article or a journal written by Brashers in 2001 talking about communication and more specifically how it relates to uncertainty. One of the first points that he talked about was anxiety and uncertainty and how they relate to each other. He wanted to let us know that anxiety is not caused by uncertainty. They are two separate entities that don't really have anything to do with one another. And then he goes on to explain, which is my next point, how those are not related. So next he talks about how about appraisal and emotion. You have four different kinds of appraisal. You have positive, negative, inconsequential, and a co-appraisal. Positive appraisal can come when you see the uncertainty as a benefit to when you're doing something. So like a long-term benefit when you're viewing uncertainty. Negative appraisal is when you view the uncertainty as a threat. That could be when you don't know enough information about that certain subject or topic and you try and find out more information about it, which I will get into in a minute. Third is the when uncertainty has nothing to do, or when the appraisal has nothing to do with the uncertainty. It's when it doesn't really affect anything. And then fourth is the co-appraisal, when you have a mix of both positive and negative uncertainty. And then the last point in this is the behavioral and psychological. These go more in depth with the positive and negative appraisals, saying how with the negative appraisal you have like fear. It could translate into fear, and it starts becoming more and more negative in your mind, and you start to try and avoid the uncertainty so you don't have to deal with it. Now on the other end, you have positive, which you try and seek out more information to try and become more in tune with what the uncertainty is that you are uncertain about. That makes you a lot more positive in your emotion and leads to less bad emotions when dealing with uncertainty. Next, I'm talking about objectification. This was written by 5 separate authors: Landau, Rothschild, Sullivan, Kiefers, and Osman. This was in 2012. It's a journal. And they talk about how, or they did 3 separate studies dealing with how men objectify women when trying to positively relate with them. So their first study, when positively relating with women, when men are uncertain about their, when they're uncertain about how to navigate a person, and in this case a woman's subjective attributes, they then disregard those subjective attributes and focus more on the objective and more on their physical appearance. This study led to their hypothesis stating that their uncertainty would, or that their objectification would increase when their uncertainty was more. The second study was the same as the first one, but it also included their self-esteem. It also primed them with the uncertainty to navigate the women's subjective attributes, with already being primed with it having to do with their positive self-esteem as well. This came out with the same conclusion that they will objectify women more when they're uncertain about how to navigate their subjective attributes. And last, they talk about in their third study in a workplace. They have managers and their uncertainty to manage. They will subjectively view the employee, or they will more objectively view the employee if they are uncertain that they will successfully manage them properly. So my section was mainly about talking about the individuals and subjectivity of how it relates to uncertainty. I will now be passing it on to Michael, who will talk about a more broader view and a group scenario in uncertainty.
Thank you. So, uncertainty may also be tied to an environment or an experience. According to Larson, Jan M., and May Martha of a 2016 journal, transformative learning as conceptualized by Measro occurs when individuals work to sort through dissertations they experience outside their current frames. As we're students, we have the ability to travel or study abroad and immerse ourselves in learning experiences. Managing uncertainty in a classroom setting can already be difficult. If you transfer that to an unfamiliar experience, it could be daunting to them. In the study, faculty brought students to a village in Moldova where they taught journalism to the community, and the what-if factor took over their uncertainty. What if our translator didn't show up late, or what if she didn't show up at all? Researcher students' uncertainty. Larson, Jan M., and Jay and Faye Martha in a 2016 article stated that students' existing conceptions were challenged. They experienced uncertainty and struggled to make sense of both their environment and experience. However, if you engage in sense-making, it can manage these challenges ahead. Also, faculty observe students' behavior changes, which is involved with uncertainty management. We have made a change in our behavior in response to something that's unknown or unclear. If we manage uncertainty, there is opportunity for hope and optimism as well. To achieve transformative learning, the learners will need to interpret and reinterpret sense-making, which is blocking one sensation from another sensation. This is essential to making meaning, also enhancing learning. The students were able to refrain from uncertainty and embrace their experiences. Acting in the unknown, they had the ability to act amid uncertainty. Also, Larson, Jan M., and Faye Martha in a 2016 article stated that there is opportunity for learning and growth as both teacher and learner face new expectations and strive to make meaning in the face of the unknown or unknowable. I believe that guiding students as they encounter uncertainty demands greater attention, and we should focus on that. As I linked uncertainty to an international experience, I will pass it on to Jonathan, where he will further explain a cultural context.
Thank you, Michael.
So for my part, I had cultural and economic effects. For the cultural effects, we took a look at the different cultures having different levels of uncertainty avoidance, and to do so, we referenced Hofstede's 1993 journal published journal, which you may or may not have heard of. It's the Hofstede Cultural Dynamics. So it's different certain different cultural elements that are compared across different regions and different populations to determine sort of business and social interaction of those people. So for uncertainty avoidance, they found that they have different levels of tolerance for unknown and the different. So when comparing certain Northern European cultures, they found that they had a high level of uncertainty avoidance. So they preferred things to be strict and structured and have rules and guidelines set out for them to begin with. When compared to certain Southern European countries, they found that it was much less uncertainty avoidant, where they were able to operate without rules, and in fact, they had a preference for less rules. And so, looking at the Hofstede 1994 study, they found that these preferences led to conflicts in between the different groups. So when placed in a scenario where you had two different groups, one that was highly uncertainty avoidant and one that was not highly uncertainty avoidant, you'd find structural differences, conflicts based on work preferences, the way you would like to work, the way you'd like to be managed, and those certain aspects that affect your daily life and your daily work in a team environment. Whaley and Samner also did research on explaining how in an article where they were explaining the cultural differences and communication in uncertain situations. So being able to communicate directly versus indirectly using the uncertainty theory, not knowing whether or not you'd have a positive or negative reaction, that also impacts the cultural issues. So moving on to the economic effects, we found that in Platt and Hoyle's 2008 journal, they found that risk avoidance is common in all economic models. So when building an economic model, you think about like a stock portfolio or a business decision where you want to take on as least amount of risk as possible for the most amount of reward. And so in different economic models, there are different ways of mitigating this risk. Leon and Kay, a 2018 journal, found that humans are illogical, essentially. We don't make decisions based on the actual expected value, which is the percentage, like chance of something happening times the value of that outcome. So when thinking about it, an example is you might pay $5 a week for a lottery ticket expecting to get that huge payout when the probability is so low that multiplying it by that huge payout would not net you the return that you would just get if you took the $5 and put it in a savings account. And so over time, we find that people who like to associate, or Lee and Chin in 2014 found that they like to assume a higher risk when getting a higher reward, or a lower reward, to assume that you would have a lower reward being negative, you would assume that you would take on a higher risk of having that lower reward or negative reward not happen or be lowered to a certain point where it wouldn't seem as bad. When we are looking at a higher reward, we want as low risk as possible to make sure that we do receive that positive benefit from the high reward. And with that, I will pass it on to Gerardo.
Thank you. And for the final part, we're talking about the conclusion. We've just learned a lot about the different ways that the uncertainty theory is used. We have economic, cultural, communication, and just learning as a general, and also my example of the pricing decision. And it's important to just kind of realize that with regardless of how much preparation that things kind of happen, like going from the intro to now the conclusion, there's a lot of things that we can't really control involving this theory and how it's used in many different ways, and it's just in so many different parts of our world. So, yeah. And with that, these are the references that we have. And finally, just thank you so much for listening to our presentation about the uncertainty theory. Does anyone have any questions for us? No questions? Professor Moore, do you have a question for us? Maybe you?
Why don't you give me some examples of how you see uncertainty theory in your internships that you have had?
Is it okay if we do it as like a potential internship that we could have, like if we like had an internship. I'd say I definitely had this experience recently. I just came out of an interview a couple days ago where they had me do like a technical interview, and I was uncertain. They told me I was going to do a technical interview, and I was uncertain about like what I needed to prepare for. Like I knew what the company did, and like the kind of aspects that they provided to the clients that they had, but I didn't know what specifics they wanted me to do. So I got in there and they had me do the technical interview, and they, you know, walked me through it after me asking a bunch of questions, and they said afterwards that it was fine, but overall I was, you know, pretty uncertain about what I wanted to do or what they wanted me to do. But after them basically telling me what I needed to do and walking me through step by step, it became a lot more clear. And I can kind of relate that back to like having like a positive like appraisal and having like more of a positive outlook going forward.
I think for me, one aspect of the interview process and the internship process is when you do get called back and you know you're recruiting, you're courting like a potential employer, so you're talking to them, you're doing events with them. I've had an experience recently where I thought I had, you know, I put in my time, they seemed to really like me, I put in a lot of work, it seemed like a sure thing, and then at the very last minute, it got cut off. So I think that's a negative appraisal. Like even if you think you have a high chance of something happening, it's always uncertain. There's never like a 100% chance either one way or another. And it could, you have a positive sort of scenario where you don't think you're going to get something and then you do get something. So you never know.
Like it's like you study for a test, you know, you think you're gonna do well and you get your grade back and you're like, oh, you know, you put the paper back down because you don't want to look at that grade. I mean, it's worse than the temperature outside, honestly. So, or maybe some scenarios where you have a true and false exam and you guess on like 10 of them and you somehow end up getting like an 80 or higher. You're like, oh, well, not too bad. But I mean, I guess that's how we would answer it.
To me, uncertainty in the work setting, I had the opportunity to either just stay there at Amazon and move up, or just to go to school instead and then move up after the fact. So I was uncertain if I should just stay there, if it would take me longer to go to school, get the degree, and to go back to do what I want to do, or just stay there and try to move up in ranks like that, without the degree.
So when you guys started looking at the theory, did you find anything that followed the theory afterwards and kind of, like the theory kind of laid a base for another theory that was kind of broad question? Broad. I'm just curious if that was like a thing, like, it's like, I'm just curious.
I wouldn't say we were, I mean, I personally didn't find anything relating to like any other theories as of right now, but if I were to go back, I could probably find a connection between them.
If you let me use my phone right now, I could probably I mean, so it's, once again, we're using the theory and principle that there's always uncertainty, you know?
Yeah.
So, another case of that, right?
Yeah,
Well, I think uncertainty theory can be applied to a lot of other theories. So anytime you're talking about risk or some sort of situational theory where you don't know what the outcome is, like uncertainty avoidance and uncertainty theory in general can be applied to it. And it doesn't really set the baseline for anything just because it's present in everything. So no matter what you're talking about, it's going to be like a little bit of risk. And you can always use the uncertainty theory because you never know for sure like what's going to happen.
So it's like prep. So like being ready is just pretty much like key features of uncertainty. You just want to prepare as much as possible.
That's true. You want to like minimize that amount of risk to maximize your reward. So.
You guys talk about how being uncertain is a very negative trait to have. Do you think being uncertain could be positive in a situation?
So I have the examples of both being positive and negative. It's definitely, people view it as it being a lot more negative, but you do have the opposite side. You have the positive aspect where, sure, you're uncertain about something, but you can also do a lot more to reduce that risk, like Derek was talking about, and reduce that uncertainty to make it a more positive outlook. An example of like a positive appraisal could be not knowing like your future, or I'll use the example that they used in the journal. They were talking about like healthcare, and they used the example of a positive appraisal being not knowing the future in that healthcare, which could be looked at as either positive or negative, but they viewed it as positive because they knew as much information as they could. So they were able to reduce their, I guess, like he said again, the risk that are proposed for the future.
Any other questions? We will move on to our
Should we get our thumbs
So
up?
if y'all,
Yeah,
if y'all would like to get any device out that can run Kahoot, you have a Kahoot for y'all.
louder. Everybody done signing up?
I'll give you 5 more seconds.
Oh.
The first question, does uncertainty affect everyone?
Wow. Somebody's really confident.
They were just uncertain, right?
Uncertainty.
Not sure is in the lead. Let's go.
What example of uncertainty did you enjoy learning about the most? Yeah, culture. Good job, Eric.
I won.
All right, justification.
I mean, I have 2, so I think I won.
Not sure.
Not sure, still in the lead.
What is transformative learning?
It's a hard one. Whoever writes the answer. Alright, that was a close one. Come on, guys. Ooh, yes.
Who is the best advanced speech professor?
Elma.
Elma.
Taking a strong second. Alright. Hello. Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much for listening.